St. Louis's Boeing prepares for a strike after thousands of union workers rejected a contract.
And I have to say, we want products made in America, made by American hands.
Dollars in new military assistance for Ukraine. $800 million of this will help strengthen Ukraine's arsenal for the most urgently needed defense equipment.
A major shift is shaking up America's defense industry, and few saw it coming. One of the country's most crucial sectors is being challenged, and surprisingly, it's a close ally that's behind the move. We'll get into the full story soon, but first, imagine the ripple effects. A top US defense contractor has been sidelined in a high-stakes military deal. Something significant is unfolding behind the scenes, and it's only gaining momentum. Here's a hint. It involves a multi-billion-dollar fighter jet contract that many assumed was in the bag for American companies, now suddenly heading in a very different direction. Why would a trusted ally make such a dramatic move? Stick with us. We're going to explain what caused this unexpected turn and what it means for workers, taxpayers, and global security. This isn't just a one-time event. It could be the start of a much bigger change. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit the like button. It really helps support the channel. In Ottawa, the announcement hit like a bolt of lightning. Canadian officials revealed a multi-billion-dollar contract for next-generation fighter jets. But instead of going to American manufacturers as expected, it was awarded to a coalition of international firms. For the first time in decades, a defense deal of this scale shut US companies out completely. These contracts were once thought to be a sure thing for US firms in places like Missouri, Texas, and Washington. But now, Canadian pilots will be flying jets assembled in Montreal, powered by engines and parts sourced from Europe and beyond. US officials believe the move may be retaliation for recent trade tensions, specifically high American tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and aircraft components. By turning away from the US, Canada sent a clear message. It wants more reliable, less politically risky suppliers. That decision has major implications. Factories in Seattle and Fort Worth, homes to major American aerospace hubs, could now see expected orders vanish. Also, be sure to subscribe if you haven't yet. It really helps us grow. Back in the US, the consequences were swift and painful. In Fort Worth, Texas, thousands of workers at a Lockheed Martin plant were left stunned as contracts evaporated overnight. Outside the factory gates, workers gathered, many in disbelief. Union leaders warned that layoffs were likely. To them, this wasn't just a lost deal. It was a betrayal by a longtime ally. The mood was just as grim in St. Louis, Missouri, where Boeing's defense operations are vital to the local economy. Suppliers across the country, from Midwest metal plants to California avionics firms, faced uncertainty as the Canadian demand disappeared. Economists estimate that more than 20,000 American jobs could be at risk if this trend continues. Smaller subcontractors may be hit the hardest. This isn't just a corporate story, it's a community one. Across aerospace towns, people are beginning to understand a hard truth. The very trade policies designed to protect American jobs may now be threatening them. The pain goes deeper than economics. Fighter jets are symbols of American strength, industrially, technologically, and militarily. Aircraft like the F-16, F/A-18, and F-35 have formed the backbone of Western air forces for decades. So when Canada, arguably America's closest ally, chooses to buy elsewhere, it strikes a blow to US prestige and raises a troubling question. Is America still the go-to supplier for cutting-edge defense equipment? Pentagon insiders admit they were blindsided. They expected routine negotiations, not a complete shutdown. For years, it was assumed that American aircraft would dominate the fleets of allied nations. Now, that assumption is crumbling. Observers from Europe to Asia are watching closely, and many believe this could mark the end of automatic American dominance in global arms sales. In other words, Washington can no longer count on being the default choice for advanced weaponry. The political fallout came quickly. Lawmakers from aerospace-heavy states like Texas, Missouri, Michigan, and Pennsylvania demanded explanations. These states depend on the jobs and tax revenue that come from defense manufacturing, and local leaders are now worried about what comes next. Back in places like Fort Worth and St. Louis, mayors and governors are calling for federal action. Layoffs and budget shortfalls are looming. Even local school districts are preparing for cuts as tax revenue tied to aerospace jobs begins to shrink. Across the country, people are starting to ask, have trade wars designed to protect American jobs actually made things worse? Experts warn, this is about more than one lost deal. The U.S. aerospace industry is one of the few sectors where America consistently exports more than it imports. Every lost contract chips away at that edge. If other allies, like Poland, Australia, or Japan, see Canada getting better terms elsewhere, they might follow suit. That would mean even more defense orders going abroad and more American jobs at risk. It could also drive up the cost of aircraft at home. With fewer big orders, U.S. manufacturers would need to raise prices to cover fixed costs, meaning American taxpayers would pay more for fewer jets, while foreign allies save money by buying cheaper alternatives. In the end, it's U.S. taxpayers who would foot the bill, while American companies lose ground to global competitors. For many Americans, this isn't just about jobs, it's about identity. For generations, the U.S. aerospace industry has been a source of national pride, from the Wright brothers to stealth jets. Now, Canada's decision to go elsewhere shakes that confidence. Some are beginning to ask whether trade policies meant to protect American industry are actually driving partners away. And for the workers who built those jets, this feels like more than a financial loss. It's a sign that trust is fading. If even a neighbor like Canada is willing to walk away, other allies may soon ask, why shouldn't we? This moment is a wake-up call for a country that has long believed its technological superiority was beyond challenge. Inside Washington, frustration is mounting. Months ago, some Pentagon officials warned that aggressive tariffs could push allies toward foreign competitors. At the time, those warnings were largely brushed aside in favor of short-term headlines. Now, with the Canadian fighter jet deal finalized, those early concerns seem justified. One defense analyst put it bluntly, this isn't just about losing a sale, it's about losing trust. And it's not just military leaders feeling the impact. Across the country, families are starting to feel it too. In towns from Texas to Seattle, the consequences are deeply personal. It's the waitress at a diner in Missouri serving coffee to laid-off machinists, or the teacher in Texas worried about how shrinking tax revenue will affect school budgets. For many, it already feels like the trade war has hit home, and hard. Economists say the implications of Canada's decision go far beyond a single contract. Aerospace isn't just an industry, it's strategic. It touches on national sovereignty, security, and economic stability. By choosing to buy from foreign manufacturers, Canada is signaling that it no longer wants to depend solely on the United States, especially when political tensions are involved. That's a powerful message. It suggests that even strong borders and long-standing treaties don't guarantee business. And that message will be heard from Berlin to Tokyo. Allies across Europe and Asia are already asking themselves, if Canada can diversify its defense partnerships, maybe we should too. This marks a shift toward a more multipolar defense market, where US dominance can't be taken for granted. It has to be earned. The ripple effects are already spreading deep into global supply chains and commodity markets. A fighter jet isn't built in one place. It relies on titanium from Canada or Australia, aluminum from the American Midwest, and advanced electronics from East Asia. If Canada's orders move offshore, much of the demand for these materials will follow. That means mines, mills, and factories in places like Scandinavia, Japan, and even China could benefit, while US suppliers are left facing canceled orders. Even smaller inputs are affected. Take rare earth minerals used in avionics and ceramics. If they're sourced abroad instead of through American supply chains, that shifts long-term demand overseas. Companies in the US that ramped up production expecting Canadian orders now find themselves in limbo. Even a small dip in demand can force layoffs. A US forging plant or electronics workshop that once made parts for those jets may now need to scale back or shut down. Over time, this shift could drive new manufacturing investments abroad. Factories and resource hubs that could have been built in the US might now appear in Europe or Asia, reshaping where critical defense components are made for years to come. In a sense, the battle for market share is also a battle over where the global defense ecosystem will grow. In Asia, America's partners are paying close attention. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Australia have traditionally built their air forces around US aircraft. But Canada's move proves that viable alternatives exist. European jets like the Eurofighter or Sweden's Gripen, once seen as second-tier options, now look more appealing. If Canada can make them work, others may follow. Some nations are already developing their own aircraft in joint partnerships. They'll be watching closely to see if Canada's gamble pays off. The outcome could influence their future procurement decisions. This isn't just about pride, it's about practicality. Military alliances depend on interoperability. If more countries start flying non-American jets, joint operations become harder to coordinate. Shared training, maintenance, and logistics become more complex. Pentagon officials are concerned that a growing mix of platforms could weaken the cohesion of allied forces. The financial consequences are also significant. Analysts estimate that the Canadian deal alone could cost US defense firms tens of billions of dollars over the next decade. And this loss isn't just about today's profits. It directly affects tomorrow's innovation. Big foreign contracts help fund research into next-generation technology, more efficient engines, stealth capabilities, cutting-edge electronics. Without them, American companies may be forced to slow or halt development. Fewer export deals also mean less leverage in pricing. US manufacturers may have to accept lower margins or invest more upfront just to stay competitive. All of this could put a damper on America's pace of military innovation. Meanwhile, European companies gaining contracts are getting the funding they need to improve their own designs, steadily narrowing the technology gap with the US. Politically, Canada's move has flipped the script. Instead of the US celebrating a job-creating defense win, it's Ottawa taking a victory lap for boosting its own industry and taking a stand on trade policy. This sets a powerful precedent. Other countries are watching closely and may decide to follow suit. A NATO ally has just shown that defense spending can be used as leverage in trade negotiations, and it worked. This shift implies that loyalty to US defense products can no longer be assumed. Future deals will likely be based on performance, cost, and diplomatic alignment, not just historic relationships. The once dominant influence of the US defense lobby is no longer guaranteed. It now comes with conditions. There's a wider economic concern too. Defense exports are one of the few areas where America maintains a trade surplus. Most sectors import more than they export, but aerospace has been a rare exception. Losing a chunk of that surplus weakens the US trade position and could put pressure on the dollar. More importantly, it means less money flowing into the national economy. Those export dollars have long supported the broader defense budget, funding research, bases, and overseas operations. In short, fewer exports mean less financial room for power projection. Think of it this way. Every lost contract is like quietly removing a support beam from the structure that holds up US defense spending. Over time, this could mean leaner budgets at home or fewer resources available for maintaining a global military presence. Strategically, the US is now at a crossroads. Pentagon planners have long assumed that allies would continue buying American-made systems to maintain seamless coordination. But Canada's decision challenges that belief. While coalition forces have always managed some diversity in equipment, a major shift toward non-American platforms could complicate mission planning, logistics, and joint exercises in ways the US hasn't had to navigate before. Every time an allied nation adds a new type of foreign-made fighter jet to its fleet, the US military is forced to adjust. That means additional training programs, spare parts logistics, and command coordination, all of which add complexity over time. These seemingly small changes build up and create challenges that defense planners must manage carefully. The long-standing US doctrine of one fleet, one fight, which promotes uniformity among allied forces for easier coordination, is now facing a real test. At home, the political fallout is intensifying. lawmakers from aerospace-heavy states like Texas, Missouri, and Washington are raising the alarm. They warn that once defense contracts start flowing to foreign suppliers, American factories face long-term decline, and once those high-skill jobs disappear, they're incredibly difficult to replace. Tens of thousands of machinists, engineers, and technicians have spent years honing the skills needed to build world-class fighter jets. If their jobs vanish, that hard-won expertise goes with them. Members of Congress are already pressuring the Pentagon and the White House to act, warning that each lost contract chips away at America's industrial foundation. The message is becoming clear. If this pattern continues, the heart of America's defense manufacturing base could begin to erode. But this isn't just a temporary diplomatic dispute that can be fixed with a quick phone call. What we're seeing is a deeper, more strategic shift. Allies are beginning to reassess their priorities. In an era of trade tensions, they're asking whether relying too heavily on Washington is still in their best interest. Unless the US changes course, perhaps by easing tariffs or offering clearer trade and security guarantees, other nations may quietly begin building contingency plans of their own. Canada has just demonstrated that even a relatively minor trade conflict is enough to justify breaking with long-standing traditions. That decision won't be forgotten. Some analysts suggest we may be entering a new era, a multipolar defense economy. Rather than one dominant supplier, the US, sitting at the top, global defense procurement is evolving into a more decentralized, competitive network. In this new landscape, US influence will depend more on reliability and consistency, qualities that many allies believe have been undermined in recent years by shifting trade policies and political rhetoric. Beyond the financial and logistical impacts, there's also a powerful psychological shift underway. The perception that the US is the automatic first choice for top-tier military aircraft is beginning to fade. The long-standing belief that America builds the best jets, so everyone buys American, is now being questioned. Allies are seeing firsthand that they do have viable alternatives. That realization could reshape not only future sales, but America's identity as the arsenal of democracy. For generations, Americans took pride in the idea that their factories equipped not just the US military, but much of the free world. If that trust unravels, it may take years to rebuild. To stay competitive, US manufacturers may have to shift their mindset, from relying on political alliances to proving themselves as agile, globally competitive exporters. Fast forward a decade, and the defense industry could look very different. If more countries start spreading their purchases across multiple suppliers, the market will become more balanced, and American dominance less certain. Europe, in particular, stands to benefit from this shift. Canada's decision to award contracts to European manufacturers has given a significant boost to the continent's aerospace sector. For years, many European nations purchased US-made jets even when they had local options, simply to maintain interoperability and close political ties with Washington. But now, that pattern has been broken. European defense leaders will see this as a vote of confidence in their technology. They may argue that NATO no longer needs to rely exclusively on American equipment to maintain unity or effectiveness. Countries like Italy, Poland, and Germany will be watching closely. Canada's move could encourage them to throw greater support behind European projects like the Franco-German next-generation fighter program. In effect, Ottawa has shifted the tone of alliance discussions, subtly but decisively, toward a more balanced playing field. And in Asia, the implications are just as significant. Nations such as Japan, South Korea, and Australia, longtime US defense partners, now see that even a close ally like Canada can shift away from American-made jets. That realization may make them more open to exploring other options as well. Some of these countries are already participating in joint development projects with multiple partners. Canada's decision will be a key case study. They'll be watching to see how it plays out. More importantly, they've seen that relying on a single supplier can be a vulnerability, especially in times of political tension. US military planners worry that this trend, of allies hedging their bets with mixed fleets, could complicate coalition operations in future conflicts. It raises questions about coordination, maintenance, and supply chain reliability. What happens next largely depends on how Washington responds. The current administration faces a pivotal choice. Will it rebuild bridges with allies or continue down a path of confrontation? The United States still leads in key areas. Stealth technology, advanced avionics, and engine performance remain unmatched. But those advantages only matter if customers are still willing to buy. If the White House chooses to ease tariffs, restore trust, and offer more stable, predictable terms, it could slow or even reverse this trend. But if aggressive trade policies continue, other countries will feel justified in looking elsewhere, and many already are. The fighter jets Canada has ordered will be delivered over the next several years. But whether this moment becomes a short-term disruption or the beginning of a long-term shift will depend entirely on how the US chooses to respond. Please subscribe to the Timeful channel and don't forget to like.